Mike Terrace is a wildlife education and outreach specialist with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and he works in interior and northeast Arctic Alaska. Mike studies sign and tracking throughout the US and South Africa and spends several months every year tracking wildlife in the snow. Welcome, Mike, and whenever you're ready, please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Burl. Hello, everybody. Yep, like Burl said, my name is Mike Terrace. I'm going to do a little more intro here in 1 minute, but just want to welcome you to identifying animal tracks in the snow. And hopefully that's why you're here, because we're going to get into some serious stuff about tracks in the snow, and hopefully you're going to learn a lot from that. I am up in Fairbanks, Alaska right now. We are about 10 below zero Fahrenheit. And I've been looking at tracks in the snow probably for about a month and a half already. So that's how much time goes, how much time we spend in the snow up here. If you read that this quote on reading the White Book here, that is a quote from John Vaillant. I don't know if any of you have read the book The Tiger. It's a really cool book about Amur tigers in Far East Russia. But in that book, he gets into tracking a lot and people's ability to read the landscape and read what's going on outside. And mostly this is the rural forest dwellers and stuff. So pretty fascinating read. As I go through here, I have a bunch of pictures. And as I go through this presentation, I will point out, what they are. And I'll explain more about that too. I'm not going to just go through and do a presentation about every different species of animals with clear tracks. So it's going to be more about trying to help you to learn how to identify things on your own. And that'll make sense as we go. So right here up in the left-hand corner, if everybody can see my laser pointer, I hope. These are just ptarmigan tracks. I took them kind of at snow level, ground level. And the cool thing about this picture is, though, what are the ptarmigan doing? And this is a behavioral thing. This is a willow stem sticking out of like 3 feet of snow. The ptarmigan went up and just plucked this one willow bud off of this stem. And that's what they do all day. They walk around. That's why when you see ptarmigan tracks, they're in a big maze, because they're going to all of these stems and plucking individual willow buds off. So that's pretty cool. And then this picture here, maybe one of the coolest pictures I've taken. I don't think a lot of people would agree, in the last year anyway. I don't think a lot of people would agree with that, but this is all these tracks right here that looks like tracks from a bike or something. There's 2 sets. These are from a sharp-tailed grouse lek, and that is where the male sits and he dances to attract females that are in the surrounding area. So this big snowdrift happened to remain into the springtime, and it was the highest point where there was a male sharp-tailed grouse dancing fanatically up there for quite a while. And these tracks are fresh because we had just had a snowstorm even that morning. So I know that bird was there this morning. So that's pretty cool. So why do people want to learn about tracks in the snow? Because it seems like everybody is interested in it. And one of the reasons is a sense of place. People want to know their environment. They want to be intimate with their environment and know what's going on around them where they live. There's a lot of places that use it to record biological data. People use it for hunting, and it's also valuable for staying safe around dangerous animals. In Alaska, that may include, particularly in the wintertime, moose, cow moose, calf moose. So being able to identify things can be really important for many reasons. Burl already introduced me, so I'm not going to belabor that point myself. But yeah, I have studied tracking for quite a large part of my life, and I've studied tracks and sign everywhere from here at home or throughout Alaska, in South Africa, and all across the lower 48 states from east to west coast. This here is a caribou cratering activity where they're pawing up the snow to reach the lichens underneath that are growing on the ground. And then this fascinating picture here, where I have my hand up to the top of this mud spot, this is actually a rhinoceros rub on a tree. So they're leaning against that tree and rubbing up and down against it. That's how big they are. if you've never seen one in real life. I'm going to give a shout out to Cyber Tracker Conservation and Tracker Certification North America, because this is a group of this is a group or an organization that I became aware of. I want to say probably in 2008. Just accidentally, I kind of came across them and found out what they do, and they evaluate trackers. You know, it's the only organization that evaluates the skill level of trackers and in track and sign identification and in trailing, which is following animals. So I would just say look this up on your own, trackercertification.com. There was an article in the latest issue of Smithsonian Magazine about kind of the resurgence of tracking in the United States and about this organization as well. And if you ever get a chance to participate in any of their trainings or evaluations, I can't say enough about it and highly recommend it. It'll put you at a completely different level of learning because of the people that are involved in this. So like I said, I'm not gonna go over every species. I'm gonna get a lot more into snow and a lot of other things that you'll need to know, because the fact is, this snowshoe hare track here, it's a beautiful, it's like amazing snowshoe hare track. But this is because the snow is perfect, all right? And you're not going to see that all the time. Sometimes you're just going to see a blob of tracks, and you're not even going to see this one. You can actually see toes and stuff, and you're not going to see that a lot of the time. So we'll try to get into track patterns and stuff and learn more about how to identify things. And you can see the front feet here, how they landed and didn't break through the snow. And then when the whole back end of the animal, because these are the hind feet, because this animal's bounding, when that hind end landed, it broke this nice crust of snow around, really thin crust. That's pretty cool. And this is just a picture of a wolf track. I want you to focus on a couple things. One, it's very large. It's very wide. A lot of in tracking, we learn about canines having an X pattern in their negative space right here. So when people see something like this, they go, well, there's no X space. So there's no X across this space. So maybe that's not a canine. But just for FYI, large wolf tracks, particularly the front feet, often show they're very broad, and they show it like an H in this space, not necessarily an X like would be in a coyote track. Here's just some things, you know, this was just on the end of my road. Couple animals that I was a little bit surprised to see because I don't see them all the time, but I can look at this, and first thing I look at is like very round track here, this pattern. I see toes in there very clearly, meaning to me that animal doesn't have a lot of fur underneath its feet. Then I look at how long the stride is, the steps, and I could start to think about that. Whoa, what could that be? It could only be one thing, and that is a house cat. And then this one here, I can make out 3 toes and even a little back toe, very short stride here, walking stride, some kind of bird. And these are about 1.5 inches, by the way, around the cat tracks, and this is about 2 inches long. And this, in fact, was a ptarmigan. So think about cat tracks, because I've already seen some posts around about local Facebook pages and stuff. What is this animal that's on my porch or whatever? Because as soon as the snow comes, all of a sudden things start showing. They don't just show up because it snowed. They have been there all the time. You just haven't noticed it because you're not seeing the tracks. So you notice on this house cat, though, it's about 1.5 inches around. It has very clear toes. They're either bean-shaped or teardrop-shaped for felines. And then this pad is a trapezoidal pad. It has 3 lobes in the back and 2 in the front. You don't always see all that. And this cat even is polydactyl. It has another toe here, so has more toes than what a normal feline would have. It has 5. And the same with the right-hand track as well. So I want to start out just by saying the importance of local knowledge. And I can't emphasize this enough, because anytime that you're out there looking at tracks in the snow or even without the snow, you have to know what the possibilities are to come up with an answer, because I could go through all the characteristics. It has 5 toes, it has toenails, it has this much space. But if you don't know all the animals that would possibly be in that category in your area, you won't be able to come up with an answer. So all the best trackers that I know are also very knowledgeable about natural history, because you really do have to know everything to learn and to figure everything out. It can be very challenging sometimes. And what we have here, this is a least weasel right here. People that haven't seen them, they're very common around here in Fairbanks and in the interior. This is a redback bull, and this is a masked shrew, and this is a moose nugget. If just for size reference on those, so those are just an example. Like if you don't know those things and you go outside, how can you even come up with something like what made that? I don't know. I don't know what's here. And then it also goes for like behavioralness of animals too. The more you learn, the more you can conclude and come up with answers. And one thing I see a lot of is everybody thinks porcupines drag their tails, but have you ever followed a porcupine in the snow? Well, I have, and I take pictures and video of it, and they don't drag their tail in the snow. So don't expect that. If the snow gets to a certain depth, they will, but I've seen them walk through 3, 4 inches of snow and they don't do that. So behavior is also really important. You got to know your animals. The more you know, the less mystery there is. Sometimes you tell people what something is, and they just are like, how do you know that? And they think it's not like a magical thing. It's just knowledge. And one of the great examples of this is the difference between flying squirrel and red squirrel. The anatomy of the feet plays into their tracks. And the way you tell that is here. I have these 2 feet here. There's a red squirrel on the left and a flying squirrel on the right. So if you look carefully at these specific characteristics, the red squirrel hind feet have the 3 middle toes, straight and long and parallel, and they're way above the 2 outer toes. But if you look at the flying squirrel hind feet, not only are they not as furred, but their toes go in an arc. They don't have the same structure. So if you're fortunate enough to see these tracks in the proper kind of snow, you can see here, see this arc. This is a flying squirrel track. Clear. There's no question about it. Down here, these are red squirrel tracks. I can see the hind feet. I can see the 3 long parallel toes high above the outer toes. And a lot of times you're not going to see that, and you have to have perfect snow. So fluffy snow, it becomes a lot more difficult. You have to go more with behavior, how they bound. Flying squirrels, like in this picture here, they typically have a more boxy gait. They're like the four tracks show kind of in a box pattern, whereas red squirrels show up a little differently. They have their 2 front feet inside of the hind feet. And even that there's a lot of leeway on that too, because there's plenty of times red squirrels can make this impression as well. So you got to be careful with that. Okay, let's see. We have, because we're not going to learn everything tonight, this is basically just the basics to get you going. We have I do like a Track Tuesday post on our Facebook page, so you can follow us on social media, and every few weeks I'll do a post about all these different tracks and sign. And there's other sites out there, websites that have this stuff. A lot of them there's a lot of noise on them, and you don't know who to listen to. There's one site called Animals Don't Cover Their Tracks, where the moderators kind of keep tabs on that. And if you answer a question, you have to explain it and explain exactly why you came up with the answer. So it's actually a learning environment, not just like people saying things and they don't really know what they're talking about. So that's a good way to learn, and constantly, you'll see tracks and stuff every day that way. Not in real life, but still helpful. So resources, there's a lot of books out there. Probably the most prominent book I'd say among trackers, like a really good resource, is this Mammal Tracks and Sign by Mark Elbrock. It's not snow. There's a lot of snow stuff in here, but it's all tracks and sign, chewings, like scrapes, different scat, all that is in here. And then there's all these other books too, just some books about trailing animals. I know of one professional quality app, and it's iTrack Wildlife by Jonah Evans. And this is a really good app. I think it's the only one really that's kind of a professional grade. And it's really nice to have that on your phone too, as a resource. So I'll just go over a few things just out here every day. Some common things you might see, because it snowed and there's things moving around and you're seeing them now. So one thing, uh, these are raven tracks here. These are about 4.5 inches long. They're clearly bird tracks, 3 toes forward, 1 toe back. That's called anisodactyl. That's just a formation of the feet. Not all birds have that type of foot structure. But the thing about ravens is you notice that the 2 inner toes are hugging each other and the third outer toe is not as close. So that's a clear indicator that this is in the corvid family, or the ravens, crows, jays, and magpies. So little clues like that really help you key in on what is what. These tracks all over, these are happen to be meadow voles, but you'll also see these redback voles all over right now. And they are bounding. Notice the space between these bounds is very consistent. That's very, very characteristic of bulls bounding in the snow. As soon as we get a little bit of snow, bulls change from a trot and they start bounding. So when you see these patterns, you'll also notice you can see a line of snow down the middle of the 2 tracks. So keep that in mind, and I'll explain why that's important coming up. You'll see birds out in your bird feeder landing everywhere. This one's landing underneath a birch tree, picking up birch seeds, and look for wing marks to verify stuff. Bird feet, looks like this raven, they end up, if it's a bird with a long rear toe, they end up showing up as triangular shapes in the snow. So keep that in mind. It'll help you to look at them. And then, of course, red squirrel tracks are all over. But this red squirrel track you'll see in a dusting of snow. This is what you see in the deep snow. This track here is much bigger than the vole tracks, but they have a very similar appearance because they're both bounding rodents. And of course, there's moose. You'll see moose tracks out there. It'll show up like this in the really shallow snow. When it gets deeper, then you will not see those, and we'll look at that in a little bit. Just for your sake, this is a front foot here, and you can tell by the dew claws being wide. This is a hind foot right here. The dew claws are much more narrow on the behind the hoofs here, and so knowing that allows you to learn how is that animal moving? Is this like an overstep trot? It's moving with a little bit of speed. Another common sign that's out there right now, right at Kramer's, I saw, seeing this every day, taking a walk out there. These are least weasel tracks right here. These 2 little holes in the ground, there's a little drag there, and then there, and then there. That is a least weasel, and this least weasel is going after, you got to look real close, but you see these little stitchy, it looks like sewing stitching on the snow. Those are shrew tracks, and they are tiny, tiny, tiny tracks, tiny animals. That's like a 1/2 inch wide, probably, their tracks. And that's with all 4 of their feet landing in the snow there. Also, foxes all over the place. I should have put some coyotes up here because there's been an abundance of coyote sightings here around Fairbanks right now. But red fox, these are clear as you're going to get tracks in the dusting of snow. You're not going to see these very often like this clear. And this is the front foot here. Notice a lot of space between all the digits. That's one characteristics. They have a lot of fur. Clearly the bigger characteristic is this bar-shaped pad in the back on the front foot. Most canines have a triangular shaped pad there. Red foxes have like a chevron shape. So I know that's how I can verify that as a red fox. Front foot and the hind foot right here. Notice the hind foot is smaller than the front foot. And then when you're walking around, start learning their gait and their track pattern they leave. They leave a narrow trail. Start looking at the distance between the tracks. It varies depending on the snow conditions. Like this one is short. The one on the right here is longer. That's a 12-inch ruler right here. So 12, 30, it's like a 14-foot single stride, 28 to 30-inch stride length on this thing. And those things are all important to know. There's some things that are challenging, but there's sometimes a dead giveaway. And one of these things here, a friend sent me this picture, said, yeah, we were skiing down on this creek, and these ravens were landing and jumping and all around these tracks right here. And pictures are tough, you know. I don't like IDing things from pictures all the time, but sometimes there's a dead clue. And if you look at this, there's like those curves in the snow. That's from the body of the side of an animal bulging into the snow. And you can see this trail is a little different than this trail. This trail here is a bounding rodent. It has a long, ventrally flattened tail that drags all the time on the ground. That is a muskrat. This is a muskrat in a trot or a walk right here. And then notice when it got on the harder snow machine trail, the tracks are just in a walking stride. The body's not getting into the snow, but that tail is still dragging. So you can tell what it is just by that. I want to say a word about wolves because it always comes up as a question. A few things about it. I'm not going to try to give a definitive guide to determining wolves and dogs here, but to point some things out. Wolves have big feet. If you've never seen one in real life, you know, you could go around looking and thinking, oh, that looks like a big foot, but until you see them and have some experience with them in real life, it's pretty striking how big they are. This dog here is a 100-pound Leonberger right here. This is a wolf track right here, just to give you a comparison. They have long legs, which means they have a long stride, which means they have a long track pattern. And that's why I always tell people, don't just show a picture of a track, show a picture of the stride length and the track pattern, because they have longer legs than most canines or dogs, domestic dogs. So this between this foot and the same foot hitting the ground again is about 58 to 60 inches for this animal. They're not always remote. We got them, you know, around here, around trails, around the town. So remoteness is not a good definitive way to say it's a dog or a wolf. Wolves have the front feet are much larger, you know, noticeably larger than the hind foot here. Here's the front foot. Here's the hind foot. Notice it is splayed because wolves splay their feet. They're always tight and pointing forward. A lot of people use that. They say if the toes aren't in the claws aren't pointing forward, then it's not a wolf, and that's not true. That's definitively not true, because it's a generalization based on dog feet, but wolves splay their feet all the time, so it's not a good way to try to determine that. And then always follow through, look for associated sign like scat will tell you a lot what it's eating, whether it's a dog or not. Their hair, bones, what's in that scat, bedding areas. So always follow up with associated sign. And I'm always asking people to send me pictures of their dog, their big dog that has these giant feet, with a ruler next to it, because I would like to use that to study them and to categorize them and to know like what dog breeds are actually get up to the size of a wolf. And most of the ones that I see, like Mackenzie River Husky, 3 inches for such a big 100 and something pound dog, tiny little feet. 150-pound bull mastiff, yeah, okay, now we're getting up to 4 inches, so it's getting larger, but there's other clues in there that take it away from being a wolf. Great Pyrenees are always brought up. Here's a Great Pyrenees with the same hand in the same place next to a wolf track. And the wolf track's actually much bigger than the Pyrenees. And the wolf tracks they have a lot more fur and space underneath in their feet. So that's also a clue, is like how much space is in between the toes and in between the carpal pad and the toes. That can become a really good clue. This is a chocolate lab. They don't have a lot of space in there, and you can see that very thin lines in the track. And the closest I've come to seeing that looks mostly like wolf tracks are large-footed Alaska Huskies. Even one that I've seen with the biggest feet was only probably like a 50-pound animal, so it wasn't even a big animal, but it had big feet that were very wolfy looking. So another note on follow-through. When you see something, just don't stop and take a couple pictures of it and then bring it to someone and go, what does this look like? Because if you show this to somebody, it'll be really hard to know what that is. It's out of context, you know. It could be several different things. So if you don't know what it is, follow it. Spend some time. You're going to have to put in some work. Follow it. to where you can find some more evidence. And then you'll often get an answer that way. Many things will remain a mystery because of lack of follow through and like, oh, I'll just take a picture and somebody will know what it is, right? I didn't know what this was when I first came across it. I thought it was something else, but I followed it into the trees where the snow is shallow. And lo and behold, shallow snow would produce some really good tracks. And these tracks here, this 1, 2, 3, 4 toes, this is actually toe number 1. It doesn't usually show. It's all you might know it as a dew claw. And then this is the carpal pad that's up on the wrist of this animal. It's got a leading toe here. It's got small toes. It's got a small pad. This, of course, is a lynx track. Not the usual look you get for a lynx track. So this is a really cool look at lynx tracks. So then I backtrack it, try to find out what's going on. This lynx was walking through here, and then it started, something caught its eye and it started to trot. You see these swishes, these big swishes in the snow. Those aren't normal for a lynx track. So I know that it started to trot. And then the picture that I showed originally is where it bounded across the snow. That's why it was a big mess. Chased a squirrel up in a tree, sat under the tree for a while, and then it got disinterested and walked away. And this is a lot more normal what you would see in a lynx track. That's what they normally look like when they're just walking, doing their regular thing. Recognizing subtle differences. So this is just about learning, overlearning the obvious. You know, when you see vole tracks and you see cat tracks and all these things, okay, look at them all the time in different snow conditions because they're going to look different. And then when you're going down the trail and you see a scene like this, you can stop and go, wait a minute. This is very interesting because this set of tracks here is not the same as this set of tracks here, is not the same as this set of tracks here. So there's 3 different things going on here, which should cause you to be, if you're inquisitive, to go figure out what the heck happened. So go to the terminus of this loop that I just had, and there's some big disturbance here. And when you start looking into it, you can see that this is actually least weasel chased a vole out of the snow. This vole came out and ran, trying to escape, and this least weasel came and cut it off. And that terminus was where it was literally captured right here. This is the least weasel tracks. This is the vole tracks. This is the capture. And then they struggled. Some of this I'm making up. It's just envisioning. They struggled, and then finally the vole was dead, and the weasel bounded back with it. You could see it drag. You see that big drags in this track. So just knowing the distance between the tracks of a vole, very consistent. They have drag marks going in, drag marks coming out. Compared to this least weasel, they're longer stride. There's a little less consistency in the length of the gaps between the feet. And then when they were coming back, you could clearly see, if I had a better picture from above, that it had something hanging out of its mouth when it went. If you haven't seen a least weasel, this is what they look like. And these are pretty typical tracks of a least weasel. You can see the feet are, this is a specific gait, a 2-by lope, and they are both feet, front feet land here, hind feet land. Notice they're on a diagonal. That's a good indicator that it's in the weasel family. And then they bound forward like a slinky. So weasels with prey. This is an ermine. This is like a 6'1" or 2 human. This is an ermine. Notice how long those strides are. 3 feet bound, 3 foot in their lope. Pretty long distance. And it was going into the bushes up there. And this is it coming back. Very different. Notice what's different. The stride length is different. Very short. Now it's all of a sudden it's down to like a foot, 8 inches or 10 inches. And there's a lot more drag stuff going on. And you could see something on the side here dragging. And that is because it went in and caught a vole and is now dragging it back to wherever it wants to go eat it. And if you start looking around, this is another ermine, do same thing. These are feet hitting the snow. Every bound, it has a vole hanging out of its mouth, and those feet are hitting the ground. So you could tell this is a regular ermine. If you know regular ermine and least weasel tracks, you'll know when something is different. Snow has many different faces, many characteristics. And I'm not going to go down this list, do like a Forrest Gump thing with the shrimp, but there is like dense snow, shallow snow, powdery snow, so much differences in snow that all of those translate into the tracks are different in all of those different types of snow. So it's literally like a never-ending learning experience or figuring things out. But if you have the basics down, you'll be able to figure stuff out. Here, for example, these are ptarmigan tracks, even inches away from each other. These are breaking through. This bird's breaking through the snow. This one's not. It's breaking through here, but it's not breaking through there. Just like 4 inches apart. So why is that? Um, Behavior of the bird and also the snow conditions. And these are actually ptarmigan tracks as well. You could tell they're exactly as the ones on the left, but the ptarmigan stepped on fluffy snow, compacted it, and then there was a big wind and blew away all the loose snow and just left these compacted little tracks there. A lot of people think, oh, I already know what this looks like or what that looks like, but I know what a mink tracks looks like. Okay, but when the snow changes, these are mink tracks here. This mink is bounding through somewhat shallow snow. Maybe there's some firm snow underneath there. See the diagonal pattern? This is a 2 by lope here. This is also a mink. This is in extremely deep, fluffy snow. The mink, doesn't have big feet. It's not well adapted to deep snow. It is struggling to hop or to bound or lope just a few inches to move through this deep snow. This has been on firm ground. It changes gait completely to its normal 3x4 gait, where you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see all 4 of the feet. And this is also a mink. They slide often, going down little hills and stuff. So all these pictures were taken within 60 yards of each other as well. So they change it up dependent on the snow condition. And this is just a picture of a mink tracks, pretty clear mink tracks. You can see the 5 toes pretty clearly connected to those claws. Subnivean environment is really important to understand. That is under the snow. There's a lot of life going on under the snow, particularly with our small mammals. And that drives a lot of predation, predators like owls and hawks and weasels and foxes and coyotes and everything else. So, and snow affects wildlife in a lot of ways. I'm not going to get into all that, but movement of the animals, survival of the animals. Too much snow can be harmful. Too little snow can affect things because they don't have insulation. So there's a lot of things that go into snow and how it affects wildlife. When snow is compacted by a trail, that's why you see a lot of tracks around small mammal tracks like bulls and shrews around trails, because it compacts the subnivean zone down to like concrete. So if you're an animal and you're running through this stuff, all of a sudden you hit a brick wall, you got to come up and go across that trail because you can't go through it anymore. So testing snow, snow is just not a uniform substance. It has layers to it. Every time it snows, the snow is different and the layers are different. Sometimes there's crust, sometimes there's ice layers, etc. So one thing that I always do when I go out, I always put a stick, walking stick or whatever, into the snow and let it slide out of my fingers and see how far it drops before it stops. Right now, there's about 2 or 3 inches before it hits a little bit of a crust. So I know that, and I can push it through. And then where's the next crust? That might be 6 inches below that. And I'm learning all that stuff for a reason. I want to know that for a reason. I'll explain. Because when you're out and you're going down the trails, you can glance on the side and go, oh, look, there's like a very small crust under 3 inches of snow. I know the only animal that's going to stay on top of that with this kind of feet right here is a red fox. And in fact, this red fox is actually walking, not trotting like they usually do, and it's got a very short stride purposefully so it doesn't break through that crust. So it just helps give you information. And same with other bird tracks. This isn't sinking in. I know there's a crust here. I know if it's sinking in 2 inches and then hitting that crust, maybe that helps me determine that is a ptarmigan and not a sharp-tailed grouse. So all of these little factors play in. And then knowledge of place is really important, to account for. We send pictures of tracks around everywhere and expect people to answer questions about it or make some judgments, and without being there, without being in that environment. And environment is a giant part of it. Like, if you know your environment, you know what's there, you know what the conditions are, you know the possibilities. So that include as much information as you can, I guess, when you're sending in pictures. And this picture is just really cool. Cross shape, kind of big foot right here with the big long extension on the end of it. And within there is another track. This is a red fox track within a lynx track right here. And this red fox, I saw the red fox trail disappear, and I'm like, where the heck did it go? And it jumped into this lynx trail, and the snow was really deep, and it just followed this lynx trail step by step, saving a lot of energy. And if you wonder where this tail comes from, it's very characteristic of lynx. And the reason is if you look at a lynx rear foot, here's the main part of the foot. This long metatarsus ends up, when the snow is deep and it sinks in, that metatarsus ends up pushing into the snow. So at a glance, if you know that, you can go, oh, that's obviously a lynx track, right? And then if you're using relative characteristics about snow, or I should say, if you're using snow condition as a characteristic, you have to consider the relativity of them. So the location, because you could say a fisher or a mink sinks deeper than a marten, but if you don't know what the snow condition is, I can't make a judgment on that. I have to be there. I have to know the conditions, okay? Because ptarmigan might not sink in at all, or if the snow's right, they might sink in quite a bit. And if this ruffed grouse can't stay afloat at all in this powdery snow, it just plows through. And then there's some things that look different than a normal. I saw this track here. If you think about these triangles on right side, left side, right side, there are a series of triangles with this snaking snow through it. That's very characteristic of cats walking in deep snow. And I was like, wow, I don't really see lynx doing that very often, but considering the snow conditions there, this is what the snow conditions were. It was so fluffy, powdery, like snow machines are just going through it like a tunnel. So this is what you get when a lynx is doing that. They're not magical. They float really well, but they're not magical. So they sink in certain conditions. So if you know what normal is and you see something unusual, then you're kind of starting to figure out a story. You see tracks, big wolf tracks. And then these tracks leave the trail for some reason and bound through this super deep snow, very energy consuming. Why are they doing that? I heard a raven too, maybe, or saw one. You got to follow it and see what's going on. You see a trail. If you ever see a trail that's used more than once in the snow, man, there's something going on. Something's using it for a reason. Either it's in their range, they're going from one place to the other, or they have a kill going on, or there's something happening worthy of investigation. So follow that thing, and you might find a big surprise at the end, like a dead moose, wolf beds, scavenging, all these different things. But you have to be inquisitive in order to do that. So gait changes are one of the major effects that snow has on animals' movement and behavior. They change their gait based on snow conditions. And all these tracks are marten tracks. This is like a normal marten in firm ground. It's doing a 3x4 lope. This is a marten when the snow gets deep. They start right into this 2x lope, it's called. Again, they're all 4 feet are landing in these two tracks here. So they're like a slinky, boom. Their whole body is bounding out. The front feet take off and the hind feet come landing in behind it. And they also walk based on what they're doing, what their behavior, investigating, whatever they're doing. The smaller weasels do the same thing. Like ermine, they bound. A lot of erratic bounding. They're very erratic, ermine. But even them, when they're on firm ground, they go out of this 2x lope into a bound with all 4 of their feet showing. Wolverines, they can walk in super deep snow. They can, if the snow is more firm, they will do this 3x4 lope where all their feet are shown, or sometimes just three of their feet will show, because one of the hind feet lands on top of a front foot, so it looks like there's only 3 tracks, but there's really 4. And they also do this 2x lope as well in deep snow. This is a Wolverine track, really clear, crystal clear track. This is a picture from Ned Rosell, and you can see the 5 toes. You see this lumpy pad here, the palm pad made up of all these segmented pieces, and then this wrist pad. This is a front foot, or proximal pad, or wrist pad. So when you're going on a trail, you probably won't see something that clean and clear, but you might see something like this. This could easily be passed over for a dog track, because it's kind of 1, 2, 3, 4. I only see 4 toes and looks like a triangular heel pad. But if you know the characteristics and look closely, you will see that that's like a perfect right front foot of a Wolverine. Otters too, they change their behavior. Otters will lope, in a 3x lope, just like a lot of other weasels. But in the deep snow, notice otters, their legs are super short. They don't stand a chance in the deep snow. So they end up transferring over to this very funky thing. It's just a slide, and they push and slide, and they'll do this a lot. And this can go, I think a friend sent me this picture. He said, "What is this? This went on for like 3 miles out in the mountains." And it's like, yeah, that's a really cool otter trail. Voles, shrews, all the smaller rodents, they will also go from walking or trotting into bounding in the deep snow. Bigger, fatter rodents have a much harder time getting through the snow, so they basically will keep walking, but they'll just push through, and they might try to bound through the snow as well, but that's pretty intense. So this is a porcupine pushing through the steep snow up a hill, which is pretty crazy. I kind of feel bad for it. And then if you look at these barbell-shaped tracks all around here, that's an ermine just probably bouncing just gleefully around on the snow with no problem, watching this porcupine struggle. And same with this marmot. It's too big and it's too heavy to do any big bounding. It's just pushing itself through the snow. And then most of the larger animals, they go from whatever kind of walk they do to they end up doing a direct register walk. So their front and their hind feet on each side of the body land in the same hole to save energy, and it's much easier walking. And this is a lynx trail here on the left, and a much longer strided moose track. Unless something's happening with them and they're getting chased, or they need to, exerting a lot of energy, they might bound through the deep snow as well, like this caribou. Animal gaits track are also affected by motivation, So this is a red fox coming through here in a side trot. And once it gets here, it starts to do this kind of bound. And then a final leap, and it over here, it pounces on a bull. Like you probably see them do that in the fields. Common gaits that you should probably learn at some point are walks and trots. I'm not going to get into there's a bunch of different kinds of walks and trots when you start to nerd out on this stuff, but the direct register trot, or walk or trot, is like this. It's just each side of the body is having the front and the hind land in the same place. Sometimes that doesn't happen. You have an overstep walk, like the hind foot lands in front of the front foot on each side of the body. Lynx normally do this. They do a big overstep walk, just normal, but then they change to a direct register in the snow. So cool things to remember. And then these are lopes and gallops. Just the most important thing here is that you have a group of tracks separated by a space, and then another group of tracks. So you need to learn that and know when there's a set of tracks and there's a big space, because that really helps to inform you of what type of animal that might be. And so there you go. This is a gallop, group of tracks. Watch your dog and have it go run through the snow, and you'll see this a lot, because they can't walk through the snow very well. They'll start what it looks like a bound or a gallop, and then study that. This is just a river otter doing a lope. This is actually a gallop, because most of the hind feet are past the front feet, but I'm not going to get into those technicalities. One really important thing to know though is with bounce elopes, there is a center line, a straight center line. And this is going to help you to determine that it's not an animal that's walking or trotting, because this animal is bounding or loping because it's going from, there's no sides of the body. These are left and right feet. So there's a center line. And that's really important. This is a marten doing that 2x bound. This is the same marten, it's just sinking in deeper. And here's a wolf bounding bounding through the snow. See the straight center line? And right here, I just pointed that line. That's what I'm talking about. When you have walks and trots, when animals are walking or trotting, there's a left and a right, a left and a right, left and a right side of the body. And you can notice this, subtle as it may be, like in this wolf trail, you can see that. So you can't mistake it in the deep snow for it being a bounding animal. Same thing here. There's a thing called a side trot. You may see your dog do it. They kind of looks like they're a little sideways oriented, and their hind feet are going between their front feet, and they're usually looking a certain direction when they're doing that, almost like a crab crawl or crab walk. When that happens, you still have the right side and the left side, right side and left side of the body, because you can mistake this for some other kind of animal in a 2x lope if you're not aware of that. Like in this fox track. And when they're in a 2x lope, the front and the hind feet are always on the same side. So it's always front and hind, front, and then the hind ahead of it. So that's, let's see, here's a good example of what I'm talking about there. Here's this is a fox walking right here, and this is a marten in a 2x lope. So both their feet are very similar sized in a way. And so you got to know those gaits and the track patterns associated with it. I had the idea that a fox couldn't do a 2x a side or couldn't do a side trot in the deep snow. So I went past this set of tracks and I thought, oh, there's a marten there, but it didn't really look right because there's all this space between it. So I went and followed, and sure enough, it turned into a fox track, and my hypothesis was shot. But they can do a side trot in the deep snow, but it's not going to be for very long. Other measurements that are important are the trail width and the stride length, those here, because a lot of times that's all you're going to see. You're going to see disturbances, and you're going to see the trail, how wide it is, and then how long the stride is. And a lot of times that's enough to just give you your animal. Anything unique, like this super pigeon-toed animal. I told you it's pigeon-toed, so we know that it's traveling up in the camera. It's very wide. It's a short, wide animal with pigeon-toed animal. It's a porcupine. So learn those things, and it will really help you to just, figure out what things are. Wolves have a very narrow trail width for such a large animal. This is a trotting wolf. Wolverines have very short stride, very wide feet at the front. So just learn characteristics. Again, this is the stride length of the wolves, 58 plus 60 inches, whatever it may be. Compare this to the stride of like a large golden retriever right here. Direction of travel. Let's see. How are we doing on time, Burl? Are we doing okay, or is anybody even still out there? Maybe you should give me a check-in.
We're at 7:52 right now, Mike.
Holy cow. Okay. All right. Hopefully everybody's hanging in there, because I'm lost in this whole thing. I don't know. I don't have much more to go though, so bear with me. Some of the most important, interesting stuff's coming up right now. Direction of travel. If you know the animal, you may be able to figure it out. This is a snowshoe hare. It's coming down the camera because I know they throw their hind feet in front of their front feet when they bound. Sometimes the smaller stuff gets a lot more challenging. You really need to take a closer look at, like, this ermine right here, for example. Which way is that going? Oops, I got a foot drag coming in and then not one in the front. So this animal's coming in this way and going up the camera, the way that arrow's pointing, obviously. Learn the shapes and stuff. Sometimes just looking at shapes in the snow gives you a really good indicator, knowing this is an ermine. That's in deep snow too. That's deep snow. It's sinking in quite a bit. This trail here, this is a gallop. There's a front foot, a hind foot, and a hind foot coming down the camera. And this is actually a wolf bounding through the really deep snow, coming toward the camera. And I measured the bounds from the center of this one to the center. They're 10 feet, 10-foot stride length for that bound or gallop. And that is in deep snow. It just shows you how powerful they are. Look real closely because when in the snow, direction of travel, you'll always find, not always, but most of the time, you'll find a berm of snow pushed up in the direction of the travel. So sometimes with smaller animals, you may have to look really close to see a couple flecks of powder pushed forward. And then pay attention to this little U shape in the back, either from the metatarsus or from their paw going in. Sometimes it's easy. This is a moose bed right here. Moose got up, walked this way. I know because I know moose always drag their hoofs into the track. And then you can see when they pull their foot out, it drags a bunch of snow forward. So you can just at a glance, this moose here came up, it's headed toward the trail. Birds is another thing. You could tell a lot by birds by the way they put their wings in the snow. But this bird came in for a hard landing here. It's a sharp-tailed grouse, heavy. It came in, and it takes quite a while for it to actually stop and then plow into the snow, and then it turned and walked away. Same thing here. Big boom, plowed into the snow, walked away. This is a ptarmigan taking off in the snow, and there's a few ways to help look at this, but how it tells me that it's going away. One, the way the wings are cupped. Two, they get fainter as the bird travels, meaning it's gaining lift and taking off. And then the footprints, the tracks where it's running get less and less. So this bird walked here, and then it took off here. And I could tell by the way the wings are cupped. Same here. Here's a rough grouse bursting out of a snow roost. And you can see the same thing. When they take a power flap, the wings curve and cup forward. Learning the bird wings as well is very helpful to help you determine, because all kinds of birds leave wing marks in the snow. It's not just owls and stuff like that. So game birds, they don't have long secondaries. So like this is a great gray owl, gray horned owl, or raven, long primaries, long secondaries. Game birds have really short secondaries. A lot of snow roosts, all our grouse snow roosts, so you might find that in the snow. Be aware of that. And if you do, reach in there, because that means they stayed overnight probably, and they left a pile of scat, and the scat will help you determine what kind of bird it is, whether it's a ptarmigan, like this really rough scat, or a grouse. And animals, they splay their toes, not because of the substrate, but because they can do that. Their toes, they spread them out when they want to and when they need to. Hares, these are lynx feet here. They splay. This is a cat. Take a cat and have it stretch, and you will see that it can physically stretch its toes out. This is caribou. The other thing is all this tissue in here also is supportive in the track. So it's not just dead space in there. It's very supportive. Aging, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to speed up a little bit if that's even possible, but getting close to the end here. But aging stuff, very challenging. Barring catching an animal in its tracks, it can be real challenging depending on your environment. In the wintertime, if you don't have a lot of solar input and daily fluctuations in temperature, it can be a real challenge. So tracks can also look fuzzy because of the animal's feet. We have a lot of furry-footed animals up here. So some things to look for if you can, the snow throw and the snow crumbles. Are they worn? Are they windblown? This is a moose coming toward the camera. I know it's a moose just because of the size. And then this metatarsal cut here, there's a space where the foot goes in. The leg goes forward like a lever, and then it pulls the foot out. So I know that's not a human walking through there. Use the weather. When did it snow? When was it dusting of snow? All of these things. I know this is a fox den, and it kicked snow out of it the day before, but it snowed in that morning, so I know it wasn't done since then or since the morning. Once you do get solar input, things get a lot easier to sometimes to tell the aging on. Probably the biggest thing I can tell you for the winter time when it's cold, it's this thing called sintering, where snow bonds back to the snow, the change of the snowflakes. Crystals change, and all these crumbles, they cement themselves back onto the snow. So what I do is I will go up to these crumbles, and I know it will take like an hour or 2 hours for those to bond back. So if I see ptarmigan tracks, if I'm ptarmigan hunting, I'll go up and I'll blow on these crumbles. And if they blow away, I know they're super fresh. If they don't blow away, I got to start factoring in all these other things to figure out an age on those. But that's a really good thing to know, though. Meltout, I won't spend much time on that, but a lot of people use the word meltout for everything. They just think, oh, that's melted out. This giant track of a wolf here, it's because it's melted out, but it's not. It's not melted out at all. And you could see really fine details in the track still. This was just stepped in. It was overflows, slushy ice. The wolf stepped in and it immediately froze like that. Meltout, this is a deer hoof, for example. This is true meltout. Notice the hoof here, all the stuff melted. It deforms things. Deer hoofs don't just become bigger. Wolf tracks don't just become bigger because they're melting. And the same here. This is fresh, wet snow. It's not melting. There's still characteristics in there. There's ice crystals, etc. This one is melted out. It's round. It's not the same shape as it used to be. There's directional melt out. There's, this is a track from a day before. That's melt out there. So there's a lot to learn about that. Some challenges. Telling all these small animals apart can be challenging, but I've already told you, some of the ways to do it is to just think about this. And for this one, this is a red squirrel. Space between the feet. This is the least weasel here. No space between the feet. And this is a vole trail. Very consistent distance and drags going in, drags going out, and some space between the feet. Shrews are the same. We already looked at shrew tracks. They look like, I just can only call them like sewing stitches. They're so small. Tail drags. A lot of people call things tail drags. They're not tail drags. They're actually feet going in and out. A tail drag can be right down the center of the two tracks. These are bowls right here. And this is just to get a really super close up between a least weasel, have overlap, their feet kind of overlap, and they don't leave a lot of space between the feet, whereas a vole does. And sometimes things are really challenging. You can look, and this, I thought this was some walking animal. I couldn't tell, or it looked like something walking a bush, like grass blade to grass blade. And I was like, it's walking now, it's skipping. And it wasn't until I saw this up here and I looked and I was like, oh, geez, those are wing prints there. So this was a bird taking off, 8 inches going after grass stuff. I think it was a snow bunting. I'll skip that. I already did that. I'll end with this, mountain lion versus lynx, because it's a very common thing. We get pictures all the time coming in. Like, I think I got a mountain lion track. So first of all, lynx have giant feet. Okay, they are as big or bigger than mountain lion tracks. So most people think that the size is what it is that points them out, but it's not. Like I said, lynx have very small toes. They have very small palm pads relative to the size of the overall track. And when you know that, and then this trapezoidal carpal pad, see, it's very small. And this is the bottom of a lynx foot, just to show you the size and then how furry it is, actually. Mountain lions don't have that furry feet on the bottom. Their pads show up clearly, more like a cat, like a house cat that we looked at. And the trapezoidal palm pad is very big, and big enough, in fact, that you should be able to fit all 4 of the toes inside of this. So keep an eye on that. The big trapezoidal palm pad that takes up most of the track, and you could see that in several of these tracks. So compare that to this. And there's a video on YouTube all about that. If you want to watch a 10-minute video about how to tell the difference, then go to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game YouTube channel and look that up. And sometimes there's really weird stuff out there. There's all these moose tracks here with a big big drag, like it was dragging something through the snow. And this didn't remain a mystery because we found out what it was, but it was this moose that had probably a broken foot and didn't have circulation down there, and it somehow got balled up with ice, and it continued to, the snow kept building up on it until it was dragging itself around on the snow.